If you recall, around 2006-07, if you Google Rwanda, the first image or narrative you'd get about Rwanda would be genocide. The second candidate would be gorillas. Very few of them. The third one would be Gacaca. If you have a story about Africa, it is either league directions, about violence, about rebellions, about failed negotiations, about poverty, about drought, about floods. That's the story. Those are the stories you get about Africa. Fixing a nation after 1994 genocide is a complex question. You know, genocide is the crime of crimes. It's the mother of all crimes. It's different from wars. It's different from other crimes against humanity. It's the topmost, the worst, the gravest. In 95, we would hardly talk about climate change. 95, the critical question was about security, food, shelter. You know, the basic five: food, shelter, transport, people to share. But now we've gone beyond the five basic human needs, and that's now the transformation phase. I was so happy that the idea came from young people, youth who say that ethnic identity doesn't sell. What sells is your brain, is your capacity to convince, is what you bring to the market. And these are tangibles we need to really focus on. Yes, I grew up in a cow-keeping environment and a family in Uganda where everything centered on cows. Whether it was school fees, you had to get it from cows. Whether it was food, you had to get it from cows. Whether it was peace, you had to get it from cows. So I was born and raised in that kind of setup. And personally, I didn't like cows because I had a very conflicting relationship with cows. There was this particular cow that was hornless, that used to steal from neighbors' gardens, and being a young boy, I had to pay the price. They would beat me up for having let the cow go and feed from neighbors' gardens. So I grew up with a very unfriendly environment involving cows. But later on, I had a different perspective to look at cows as resources, as peace-building animals, cows that really exemplify human beings in many ways. So later on, when we came back to Rwanda, we had a genocide-stricken country where everything was at a zero base. Relationships had been broken, lives had been lost, economy was broken completely. So I was 15 then, and later on I went to university. I studied communication, and communication you entirely work on relationship. How do you restore a relationship? How do you manage a relationship to get results? But the most important part that really influenced me to interrogate the genocide, the peace building after genocide, was my journalism work. I want to say to you that by then I was a journalist at the grassroots. In 2000, 2001, 2002, up to 2008. At that time, it was not easy. Working as a journalist, I saw Rwanda's path to what it is today. Talk of the constitutionalism, drafting the constitution of 2003. I was there. Talk of reintegration of ex-combatants. I was there at the grassroots. And the most critical part was, if I remember, the presidential pardon of genocide perpetrators. I covered that story. And here I was a young boy doing my journalism work, and I had many unanswered questions. How can a country that had a genocide the gravest genocide, pardon perpetrators of genocide. And here I was a journalist to write a story about it. Then another thing that really touched me was when there was a rumor in the southern province that there is a plan to imprison all people who had committed genocide, their relatives, and hundreds and thousands of people in the southern province left to Burundi. They left their gardens. The beans were ready for harvesting. Sorghum was ready for harvesting. I mean, thousands left to Burundi. And I went there to cover that story. Then I said, wow, that's incredible. How can people move, leave their gardens, leave the schools where children go to school and go to another country because of a rumor? Then there was Gacaca. Gacaca was eye-opening for me. I participated nearly in every Gacaca session. I heard stories, horrifying stories. I saw people breaking down. I saw genocide perpetrators being tactical with their messaging. I saw survivors struggling to give testimonies. I saw bystanders who were also in Gacaca. So all that background shaped my interest in understanding Rwanda and doing something about it. And that came in the form of scholarship, in the form of journalism, media outputs, my stories, they're still there, in the form of asking myself many, many questions. What does it take to build a nation after losing over 1 million people? What does this take? And that's why I went to study my master's in media, peace and conflict studies. But my major interest was in the last parts, peace and conflict studies. And when I went to study my master's, I was moved by the first course, which was Foundation, Peace and Conflict Studies. And this course was talking about DDR, disarm, demobilize, and reintegrate. And that's what Rwanda was struggling with. The course was talking about providing justice after 1994, after genocide, after conflict. That's what Rwanda was going through. And that course was also giving us insights on economic recovery after conflict, and Rwanda had a genocide. So all that really helped me have a foundational understanding, conceptual and analytical understanding. But remember, I had worked as a journalist. I had seen disarmament, reintegration, demobilization in practice. I had seen Gacaca, restorative justice, in practice. I had seen refugees coming back in big numbers from Tanzania, from Congo, from Burundi, with my eyes. So the classroom was like a small, complete line to what I had seen practically. And that's how I got involved in this journey of peace and conflict concepts and analysis. When I was growing up practicing journalism, I could read a lot of stories about Africa, about Rwanda. If you recall, around 2006-07, if you Google Rwanda, the first image or narrative you'd get about Rwanda would be genocide. The second candidate would be gorillas. Very few of them. The third one would be Gacaca. So when I went to do my master's, I was so bothered by that narrative. A country known for genocide, few cases of gorillas, and many cases about Gacaca. So later on I said, how can Africans produce content that is African, that really resonates with African interests, African needs for information? Journalism, if you really want to read Western media's outputs on Africa, it's usually negative. Actually, they call it negative reporting syndrome. Negative reporting syndrome. If you have a story about Africa, it is either league directions, about violence, about rebellions, about failed negotiations, about poverty, about drought, about floods. That's the story. Those are the stories you get about Africa. If you go to African scholarship, there's very little written about Africa. Most literature about Africa is written from a Western prism. They prescribe, define Africa in their own terms. So I told myself, if I get an opportunity to have a pen and time, I'll write a book about Rwanda after 1994 genocide. And I got that interest way back when I was going to study my master's. So when I finished my PhD, that's how the interest boiled in me. I said, once I finish my PhD, I will get an extract from my doctoral thesis and produce a book. And here is the book. Fixing a nation after 1994 genocide is a complex question. You know, genocide is the crime of crimes. It's the mother of all crimes. It's different from wars. It's different from other crimes against humanity. It's the topmost, the worst, the gravest. And the shortest way I can say it is a crime of crimes. So, building a nation after genocide is a cause for multi-layered, multi-dimensional approach. You don't fix one because everything is competing for space and resources and attention. Whether it is justice, it is competing for attention. Whether it is material provisions, they are competing for attention. Whether it is employment, reconciliation. So let me summarize it in 3 phases. After 1994, from 1995 up to 2000, it was humanitarian response. Security being number one. How do you ensure security of these people who are coming from genocide? Of returnees, over 3 million had come into this country. How do you ensure security of a nation over 4 million had left this country? How do you ensure security of people living side by side after going through horrible, horrific experience? So from 95 to 2000, emergency response or humanitarian response. I mean, getting people where to have accommodation, housing, security, justice. We've not started to talk about reconciliation. Whereas by then people are saying, hold directions among the Western dictates. And from 95 to 2000, humanitarian assistance or emergency response. From 2000 to 2020, that is a phase of development whereby there was intentional political will to rebuild the nation now. That is when constitutionalism was taking place. That is the period when the policymakers were setting up institutions, RIEPA of those days, the Rwanda Reconciliation Commission, return of refugees, all those. That's the period, critical period of developing the vision 2020. That's the period, and also the EDPRS, the strategy to implement the vision. So that period was very critical. So from 2024, that was the most critical period. From 2024 to 2050, that's the transformation phase. That's when reconciliation has produced 95% of results. That's the period when we have the national park, people can go to the park. That's the period when we have this Kigali Conventional Center. That's the period when we have events. This is the period when universities are graduating big number of Rwandese. This is the period when you're talking about agricultural transformation. This is the period where we are also concerned about climate change. In 95, you would hardly talk about climate change. 95, the critical question was about security, food, shelter. You know, the basic 5, food, shelter, transport, people to share. But now we've gone beyond the 5 basic human needs, and that's now the transformation phase. So, 95, emergence periods up to 2000, 2020, development phase. From 2024 to 2050, transformation phase. And that's where I am actively contributing. The Armenian genocide, though it is not internationally recognized as a genocide, it happened in many years. And there was this gentleman, a Jewish scholar, lawyer, Raphael Lemkin, when it happened to Armenians, he said, quote unquote, if it happened now, it will happen then. If it happened here, it will happen there. That was early 1930s. And afterwards, we had the Holocaust. The world never learned any lesson. From the Holocaust, we had a genocide against Tutsi, 1994. And the genocide against Tutsi happened more or less across the same period when we had a genocide in Bosnia. The world was there. We learned nothing from Lemkin's quoting that if it happened there, it can happen here. If it happened then, it can happen now. So we've had a sequence of genocide. So how do we bring in the genocide against Tutsi in all these genocides? 1994 genocide against Tutsi was really horrific. It was the shortest genocide. Over 1 million people dying in 100 days. And I don't want to compare, but it was the most brutal genocide because of the weapons used. They're using machetes. Whereas, I don't want to compare, but imagine using a panga to cut someone into pieces. So, very brutal. And it is a genocide, whereas it was organized, masterminded, planned by government, where masses actively participated. So mass participation, the Rwandan writer Jean-Paul Chimonyo calls it the popular genocide. And from the naming of popular genocide, he wanted to refer to masses actively participating in the genocide. Media participating in the genocide. Churches participating in genocide. Actually, some church members were saying even God has allowed them to die. We, the killers, are acting on behalf of God. It got to a level where people would kill the symbol of Jesus that he was a Tutsi. So the genocide against Tutsi in 1994, in my view, was a failure of humanity, because we had had many other genocides before. We had the Romanian genocide, we had the genocide in Bosnia, we had the genocide against the Jews, the Holocaust. But surely there was no commitment to prevent genocide. So the second point why the genocide against Tutsi preoccupied my mind was the Convention on Prevention and Punishment of Genocide in 1948. So I had time to interrogate this convention. I was really annoyed with it. First of all, you remember it is called the Convention on Prevention. And the second part is the Convention on Punishment. The moment you provide for punishment, you've ignored prevention. So in my view, I never want even to call it a Convention on Prevention and Punishment of Genocide. I would rather call it the Genocide Convention, so that you don't invoke the point of prevention and punishment. But look, from the adoption of the convention, and by the way, Rwanda took long to adopt it. It adopted it later on. Okay? So I analyzed it, I was like, surely, if you analyze it deeply, the provisions of this convention, had the world, the UN, international community acted, would not have had all these genocides and 1994 genocide against Tutsi, because there had been early warnings here and there. And there had been a lot of information to the Security Council, the Secretary General of the UN. And for me, that's why I said we need to find a space in discussion about genocide and insert the 1994 genocide against Tutsi. By the way, it's one of the genocides that is extensively denied. If you look at the last stage of genocide, the 10th stage of genocide, the last one, genocide denial, the genocide against Tutsi is the one that has the highest rate of denial. And to our shock, even people from Rwanda being active in denying the genocide against Tutsi. So I wanted to contribute in a discourse, intellectual, scholarly, to discuss about genocide against Tutsi in the form of a book. And for me, I have a sense of fulfillment that I have already produced it. It's up to the deniers and also preventionists to discuss about this book and say we should never, never be discussing about the name. We should be discussing about we should prevent genocide from happening anywhere. However, what I see here and there, the call by Lemke still rings and knocks on our doors and in our memories. I think it was Plato who says that for victims, the term victims in our case in Rwanda, we mean the ones who are dead. Survivors, they are the ones who live. So for victims, we owe them memories. We owe them commemoration, remembrance. The moment you forget, you are just preparing another thing to happen. So we owe them memory. We owe them remembrance. We owe them commemoration. And that's the moral justification for the commemoration we have every single year. For some people who possibly don't know, for victims, the dead ones, our dear ones who died, we owe them memory, commemoration, and remembrance. For survivors, we owe them truth. If you look at the reconciliation barometer in Rwanda, if you look at one indicator of finding out the whereabouts of people who died in 1994 genocide against Tutsi, it is lower than 50. Other indicators in their 80s, 90s, but that one is still scoring lower. And that principle of telling truth to survivors is still burning us. We need to tell the survivors the truth. Now, why is it so central never to forget? The moment you forget, you are dead. As Rwandans, we cannot afford to forget the 1994 genocide against Tutsi. Never again. Why I really rebuke and critique the principle of never again. It has been stated. It is sounding like an empty word. It's actually horror. Because when the genocide against the Armenians happened, we said, the whole community international said, never again, never again. We made this, those ones who were in UN corridor were talking about never again. Declarations were made, never again. The Bosnian genocide, when it happened, never again, never again. The genocide against Tutsi, when it happened, pronouncements, statements of never again. So for us, never again has gotten to a level whereby it's like saying good morning. Good morning, my dear friend, good morning. So we've made it a slogan. But when it comes to preventing genocide, it's not about sloganeering. It's about actions. What preventive actions have we done to ensure the genocide against Tutsi doesn't happen in Congo, doesn't happen anywhere, doesn't happen in Burundi, doesn't happen anywhere? So that's why I'm saying never forget. Never forget, because it has a preventative element into it. Never again, you've seen it, we've heard it, and overheard it. We've had an overdose of never again. That's why I'm saying let's shift from never again to never forget. If you remember, Jiringa had 3 objectives. One was on poverty reduction. The third one was on food security. The third one, which is Call for Peace, was on social cohesion, which was a major focus for my book. So social cohesion, in other terms, is reconciliation. So when I was doing my doctoral research, I had a case study in Southern Province where there are genocide survivors and genocide perpetrators, and they are trying to test the feasibility of the objective number 3 on social cohesion. To my surprise, they were using cows to cement relationship, to restore relationship. The shortest definition of reconciliation is restoring relationship. So I took that case as my central focus. I was very amazed that this model of giving a cow, before it is given out, they had to get genocide perpetrators and genocide survivors take them through a very hard conversation. Some gave testimonies. The first meeting was chaotic. Even seeing someone who had committed crimes to you, it was really shocking. Some people got traumatized, whether genocide perpetrator or genocide survivor. And they tried it many times. Eventually, that encounter session where genocide survivor meets a genocide perpetrator, over time, they got to a point of accepting to stay together, hear each other. Of course, it involved a lot of cries, a lot of, they seeing the necessity of coexisting with this person. They moved to the next step of bringing in the element of a cow. We are going to give you a cow. You're a genocide perpetrator, in most cases men, and also in most cases, genocide survivors, in that very particular case, were women, because genocide targeted mostly men. So they gave them a cow. They say, this cow, which I refer to cow for peace, is going to become a breadwinner, it's going to become a forum for conversation. And the cow became so catalytic for reconciliation. So remember, when a cow needs food, they had to get feeds. The lady would go and get feeds for the cow. The man would feed the cow. Over time, they would generate conversation. For instance, when they would be milking, the man would be the one milking. And the lady is holding the calf. In the process, they are discussing about supply of milk, about the next activity, about cleaning the cow shed, about the calf, how do we take care of it. Eventually, there was a dialogue centered on cow. Now they start to discuss about who did what. So in my book, I'm defining truth as knowing who did what, where, when, how, and why. The why tends to be extremely hard. So they had a conversation centered on cow. This cow, how does it eat? They go to hard questions. What did you do in 1994 genocide? The perpetrator would reveal the people who committed genocide, his role. He would apologize to this person holding a calf. Then the lady would ask other questions. How do we build a future we share, I and you, to sustain this cow? The man would repent, would tell stories, his role in 1994 genocide, and this lady would also give guarantee that now, since you've told him the truth about my people, how they died, I think we need to forge a future together. To my surprise, I got to know that 4% of my sample had even intermarried. They had intermarried. So, cow for peace, in other words, is when there had been violence between people and you give a cow. In Rwanda, they call it inga y'ikiro. The moment you have given a cow to this person, you commit never to betray him again. It becomes a reconciliatory resource. You can never betray someone who gave you a cow to break the continuity of violence. So that's how the idea of cow for peace came about. If there is anything Rwanda lost during the genocide and the process of preparing genocide, was the social fabric, the humanity, the unity of Rwandans. Though this didn't happen in 1994, it happened way back when they brought the national ID cards defining a Tutsi, a Hutu, a Twa. Early 1930s, 1950s, the king removed it. He banned it. But still, it went on when we got the first independence. So the Rwandanness came after 1994 genocide when we banned IDs based on our ethnic differentiations, a Tutsi, Twa, Hutu, and it is in our constitution. However, later on, this concept of Rwandanness emerged strongly from youth. They are the ones who said, we chose to be Rwandan. And later on, the the office of the First Lady really took it up, and they asked all of us to promote Rwandanness. So Rwandanness, ndi Umunyarwanda, is not a political agenda. It is an existential requirement. If you look at countries whereby they are still struggling with social identities, you see how much they are suffering because they don't have a unifying factor. So Rwandanness is an existential requirement because we've tested the damage of ethnic discriminations. By the way, discrimination is one of the stages of genocide. So Rwandanness becomes a genocide prevention strategy, and it is also a peace building strategy. The moment we see each other, our Rwandanness being superior than our ethnic identities, than our tribal leanings, we can band together, we can move forward together. Accessing resources, opportunities in this country is not based on your ethnic identity. It is based on your capacity to deliver. The moment you are not able to, you are held accountable on the basis of failure or malpractice, not on the basis of ethnicity. So, in my book, I'm saying Rwandanness should not be seen as a political strategy. It is rather a social and existential necessity for our today and our future. And the youth, more especially, should be the one to carry it forward because this Rwanda belongs to them. And I was so happy that the idea came from young people, youth who say that ethnic identity doesn't sell. What sells is your brain, is your capacity to convince, is what you bring to the market. And these are tangibles we need to really focus on. You know, Linda, you are here not because of anything, because of interest in the book. If I didn't have anything sensible, you would have found it difficult to even get rain to come and see me. So we need to bring to the global market something tangible so that we become relevant, become competitive, rather than championing ethnicity, patronizing or promoting someone on the basis of his ethnic identity. These are the bygones, and for us to move forward as a country, as a people, we need really to look at these things that build our unity, our commonalities, rather than what differentiates us. Lesson number one is that culture is a major resource in rebuilding a nation broken by conflicts and genocide. I have seen non-Rwandans coming to Rwanda asking how much it has taken to rebuild this country. And when I say it has taken the basic culture, homegrown solution is gacaca, but some of them don't find it easy to swallow because they believe the solutions that work are the ones that come from Western countries. That's where Rwanda made a difference, focusing on gacaca. One of the greatest achievements of gacaca was using little resources in a span of less than 10 years, and over 1 million Rwandans gotten justice. So restorative justice rather than retributive justice. So restorative justice means I'm not aiming at punishing you. I'm aiming at showing you what you did. You also express remorse so that you can move forward, rather than putting you in prison. I feed you when you're in prison. I take care of you. I take care of your children. So that was one of the greatest achievements. Other societies struggle with finding resources from other countries, mobilizing money, mobilizing human expertise to come and fix their programs. So the greatest lesson Rwanda can share with other countries. By the way, other countries also have certain homegrown mechanisms of delivering and administering justice, but they never give them opportunities to blossom and flourish. So the second thing gacaca has helped us in rebuilding Rwanda was the revelation of truth. I told you at the beginning that when Gacaca was happening, I was a journalist up country. I participated in many sessions of Gacaca. And a lot was talked about Gacaca, with the exception of one thing, which is still pending, the gender-based violence dimension of Gacaca. Because, when it comes to revealing information about rape, it was horrific. It was so re-traumatizing. I talk about truth being liberating, but also re-traumatizing. I can tell you so much and then I leave you completely re-traumatized. So, Gacaca revealed truth, which was not initially shared communally, collectively. But here in the open, people came out and said, this person did this person did this one, whereas he's in prison, he didn't participate. Instead, his brother did this. And post-genocide or post-conflict societies need to find within themselves mechanism. They have pre-colonial mechanism that really can be used to promote reconciliation and peace building after them, rather than waiting for Western templates that in most cases are not fitting contextually and responsive to their needs and interests. So I would summarize that Gacaca, what I cover here is that it gave at least information about who did what, where, how, when, and why. Without it, if we applied the classical model of International Tribunal for Rwanda and the classical justice delivery mechanism, it would have taken us more than 100 years to deliver justice to perpetrators and the survivors of genocide, as well as victims of genocide. So imagine 100 years from 1994, and we are now only 31 years. We would still be having 70 years to go if we applied the classical justice model. So that's the point I want to emphasize in my book. Societies need to be inward-looking, find homegrown solutions they can harness to rebuild their fractured societies, rather than always waiting for resources that come from outside. I think the Rwandan adage sums it up better, that akimuhana kazi imvura ihise. You wait for a foreign help, and it comes when the rain is over, and yet you are wait, you're completely dirty. And Rwanda learned that lesson early on for our betterment. I should tell you this. We are in a world of the fight of narratives. The global space for narrative supremacy is up and active. The perpetrators of genocide and the genocide entrepreneurs are keen to see if Rwandese themselves are not up and active to denounce genocide denial. So, scholarship. Any scholarly work, let me give you an example of a PhD. You are expected to contribute to 3 areas. One, you must contribute to generation of knowledge. What is this new knowledge are you bringing? For me, I brought Cow for Peace. Then you are contributing to generating knowledge. 2, you are expected as a scholar to generate discourse that will inform policy change or improvement. It's not simply a thesis. What value are you bringing to policy reforms, policy improvement? And for my case, I've produced a book with some recommendations that in my recommendation, I'm proposing having a Minister of Peace. Fortunately, it coincided with the formation of the Ministry of Unity and Civic Engagement. I didn't know. That was for me a plus when I recommended, and then it happened. But it didn't trigger it per se because the book had not yet come out. I'm recommending education that promotes bilingualism, so that Rwandese can be competitive. When you know French, you can compete in Francophone nations. If you know English, you can compete in Europe, US, Asia, anywhere. Bilingualism. But coming back to scholarship, you are expected to contribute to policy reform and improvement. The last one is practice. How is peace building done after genocide? How are you contributing to how are civil society contributing to peace building? Are we still using templates from Western countries, or we have our own mechanism, Gacaca or Muganda, and other homegrown mechanisms that can contribute to recovery and rebuilding a nation? Now, these are my own suggestions to build a nation, but these are not enough. Those are not ends in themselves. They're just a few. These narratives need to be amplified. The voice and the visibility of these things need to be extended. That's why I'm so thankful to you to have seen this book and said, let me give it a chance so that someone else can watch and possibly ask questions and contribute to it. We need to amplify African voice so that it is not just the Africa we know where there is poverty, conflict, violence, refugees, havocs to do with migration and climate change. I teach a course in Europe, and that course, at times I wonder why they chose me to be the one teaching it. I later discovered that it is because I can tell the story of recovery and the genocide and poverty. Because if you go to Europe, all these big UN agencies and the international funding agencies, you don't see them. You see them in developing countries. If you go to Europe and try to look for these officers I don't want to mention, you hardly find this. You find very few, but you go to developing countries. So we need to write our stories. Two, we need to digitize them. Digitizing this homegrown solution will add value to denial, because 10 years, denial will be there for many years. There are still people who deny Holocaust. So the genocide against Tutsi will be denied for years and years to come. So it is me and you, thankfully you as a journalist, me as an author, combining our efforts so that we produce something that will go to a global stage and look for its space and say, this is a stage where we are as Rwanda. We cannot look back and wait for falsehoods to take over the global stage. Let me tell you a story I read in a book by an American journal. He said that we need to really find our space in the global narrative because lies move faster than truth. The moment the truth is putting on its pants, the lies have already gone. So what the journal was telling us, the military do not have to win battles, they also have to tell their stories. So the battle to fight genocide ideology rests with me, you, and everyone else, so that the denial does not end with the first stage, which is classification. I think it was Rick Warren who said that whichever you give your time shows your heart. Where your interests attract your time. And it is easy to tell where your interests are based on where your time is spent. So my interest as a Rwandan and as a scholar was based on three considerations. One, a PhD holder should publish or perish. Unfortunately, we end up perishing intellectually because we don't publish and we don't read. So that necessity made me write this book. A PhD holder to become relevant, whether in busy public office or private work or social, you must publish. If you don't publish, you become a witchcraft, a witch doctor. You start to speculate. You start to speculate like, oh, I'm not making jokes around it, but honestly, the moment you choose to become a doctor, you've made the commitment to generate and share knowledge. So failure to do it, you become a speculator You become an analyst of events that are not really substantive, that do not have substantial value. You become a witch doctor. You prescribe things that are not evidence-based. And with today's social media, surely it is even witch doctors are carrying our space because we are not utilizing that space. So I don't want to be in that group of PhDs who have become witch doctors. So the second interest was what I said earlier, immortalizing the narrative about genocide against Tutsi. If we don't tell these stories, they are going to disappear. And we need to find mechanisms, strategies of giving them visibility and a voice so that they don't disappear. So immortalizing them is very critical. Actually, I wish this book can be turned into a digital form for my children and my grandchildren and great children can read it. That's the greatest contribution I will have given to humanity. The third interest was, doing a PhD, you have your doctorate, so what? So what next? That's how I got an extract of my thesis and turned it into a readable material, which is this book. Now, the other question you asked, how do you get time? Because writing requires reading, and reading is like fishing. I didn't know that these people who fish, they have to be concentrated. You have to concentrate and your hand has to be stable, or else you will shake and the fish will run away from the hook. So writing, you must read. And if you read, you must sort something of interest that you're going to reproduce as a readable material. So I have burnt late night candles. I have not gone to social events. I have ignored my family a bit. I have bought books. Actually, they've consumed a big chunk of my budget to get books that would complement what I'm discussing here. I have been asking myself hard questions. So all that boils down to where your interests are. Are you interested in discovery? Are you interested in contributing to discourse? Are you having something bothering you as a person? For my case, the central bother was, why did we have a genocide against Tutsi in 1994? The Convention on Prevention and the Punishment of Genocide, does it resonate really with today's dynamics? Peace building after genocide, what does it mean? What does it entail? All those questions, like any human being, rational human being, any human should be having a question burning in you. So that's why I had to produce this. And so far the feedback seems to be good. There's a lot of noise outside here. A lot of noise. Unuseful noise and a distraction. So books have become secondary luxuries. But did you know almost 90% of African economies want to become knowledge-based economies? There is no way. There is no way you can become a knowledge-based economy if people are not reading. Knowledge is an intangible asset. So if we want to promote our economies, let me start at individual level. By the way, I did go to first-class schools. I went to third-world schools without chairs, without roofs. But I got the secret, by God's grace, I got the secret of reading when I was a young boy. Actually, I would go with new exercise books to the market where they were selling pancakes. And I give them a fresh exercise book. They give me newspapers to go and read at a very early age. So if there is any gift I can pass on to my child, my children know that I will give them three things. One, my name. They carry my name. Two, I will give them education. Three, I will always tell them about books. if there is any biggest gift I can ever leave behind and I go to the grave when I'm fully satisfied, is leaving my children with books and the culture of valuing books. Actually, my children, when I ask, ibitabo ni iki? They answer in one common voice, Momotungo. Books are resources. So at least I'm no longer telling a story I've not lived. I've seen the value of books, and I am who I am today to a big extent because of books. So social media is carrying our space. But what's in social media? In social media, you can still find valuable knowledge that can change people's lives. So to young people, first and foremost, value reading. Check what you read. Have critical skills. The second point I want to advise young people, especially youth, there is no greatness without your local culture. You will be someone else if you forget your culture. Your culture is your flag. Your culture is your identity. Countries that have invested in their culture have moved very fast than those ones that have used other mechanisms. Talk of China, talk of Asian tigers, talk of South Korea, talk of Malaysia. They never substituted their culture. They built on their culture, and they've been able to move very fast to an unprecedented pace, to our shock, because some of them are more or less at the same level of development like us in 1980s. But look where they are today. They are among the first class economies. So youth, don't define civilization in terms of other people's values. Define civilization within your cultural prism. That's how you look great. So you will never be those people you want to imitate. You are just imitating. Imitating is good, but why don't you build in your own culture as a resource for greatness? The last one is very interesting, very, very interesting. Everything is very interesting, but the last one, the key takeaways, culture. I'm not inventing anything new. I'm only recommending what has been in practice, and it only requires re-emphasizing culture is my biggest takeaway, and that's what they will expect in the last page. 2, bilingualism. It removes borders. The reason as to why we were here in 1994, because people had a very narrow, fixed mind. But today we are talking about global village. And you cannot be a member of the global village when you are confined in a very funny, small state mentality. Harness your skills, linguistic skills. If you're a technologist, if you are a commercial person, linguistic skills is very critical because it can connect you to France, to Belgium, to Washington, to London, to China. Let's harness our linguistic skills. The other part is peace building is not cheap. Peace building is very costly, very expensive. It takes political will, it takes technical will, it takes commitment. And that's what I also put here, that these how many years of investing in Rwanda has already taken a big chunk of people's resources. Let's not throw it to the dogs. Let's sustain it and consolidate the gains. Now, where will they get the books? The books will be gotten from Ichirezi Library and Homegrown at airport, Kigali International Airport. That's where they can get these copies. I'm in discussion with other booksellers. I've given copies to Prestige, a bookshop in Nairobi. They've gotten copies. So if anyone is in Nairobi, you can check at Mamangina Street and Prestige Bookshop. They will get a cow 4-piece. Aristoc in Kampala, they can also get copies, but I've not yet taken them. Very soon I will be sending them to Aristoc so that the Ugandans and other people. By the way, they are very interesting stuff. I'm talking about the cow, and the cow culture is cross-cutting. You find it in Uganda, you find it in Sukuma communities in Tanzania, you find it in Kenya, Masai. And for your take also, our president has been giving out cows to other presidents, and he has also received cows from Ethiopia's prime minister. So if I talk about cow giving, the people from Uganda will see themselves in the book. The people from Kenya, Masai, the Karenjins of Kenya will find the book relevant for them. The Rwandese, especially those who were brought up in a cow culture environment like myself, you'll find it interesting. I go beyond Cow for Peace to talk about Cow for Friendship, Service for Cows, which was really the best by colonialists and first early writers like Ferdinand Nahimana. I talk about the other aspect of friendship on Obuhachi. By the way, I'm among the first ones who have written the positive dimension of Obuhachi. These other dimensions have been, it says, sufferdom, these are subjects, these are patrons, and these are subjects. But I got data from senior citizens around who swear that Obuhachi never intended to have a negative dimension. It had also the positive dimension. I talk about a cow for life. You've been to burials and you've seen a family standing up and they bring a younger boy. I never know why they consider boys only. That space, I never covered it, but I only tell a story of boys being shown to people that this boy is the one who has buried his father and he has been given a cow. But do you know the practice and what is signified? It is signified that whereas the father is dead, life is continuing through the son. Now there is also, that is cow for solace. Cow for solace, I describe it in the book. There's another form of cow giving I call cow for life. Talking about now ladies. The moment a woman or a mother would deliver a boy, the husband would gift her a cow. And that cow is called cow for life, meaning you've given life. And I describe it also in the book. There are many other forms of cow giving, which I think will be resonating with people who are in the cultural, cow culture environment and the cow enthusiast. Me, I became a cow enthusiast later on in life.